All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome back. Make sure to take out your journals. Today, we're going to be talking about Unit 7, World War II, Lesson 3. America's going to finally enter this thing, World War II. So go ahead, make sure you write down the heading. Don't forget to write the essential question. Why will the United States enter World War II, and what impact will we have? Short answer to this. Spoilers, you want your summary already. Pearl Harbor is going to be a major reason why America will enter World War II. And secondly, what impact will we have? Our forces will make a difference both in the Pacific theater of the fighting, where we are fighting against the Japanese, and in the European theater of the fighting, where we are fighting against Nazi Germany. Also against, I guess, the fascist Italians under Mussolini, but mostly against the Germans. Okay, so in the beginning of December 1941, the United States had engaged in warlike activity, but was still technically neutral. Remember in lesson 2, we talked about our neutrality. We talked about groups that were trying actively to keep America out of the war, to keep us neutral, such as the America First Committee with like their spokesperson, the famous American pilot, Charles Lindbergh. And remember that America, while we were neutral, was doing some stuff, such as the cash carry and Lend-Lease activities. Lend-Lease especially began in a few months before December here in 1941, was critical for assisting the Soviet Union and the British as they maintained their fight against the Germans. Because remember, those are the only two countries that were still involved in this thing. And the Soviet Union had just joined the war after Operation Barbarossa, when the German military under Hitler is going to invade Russia, breaking the non-aggression pact with Stalin. That brought the Soviet Union into the war, and they were desperate for American supplies. We were providing a lot of the Russian tanks. We were providing a lot of Russia with their planes and other things. And same thing for the British. Britain, especially, is an island. They were completely cut off on the western end of Europe. This was Britain's darkest hour. We shall never give up. We shall never surrender. You know, Winston Churchill's given this speech, and he's trying to keep his people together, and the Battle of Britain's raging and stuff. They would not have been able to hang on were it not for the United States. So we already were economically waging war at this point because of Lend-Lease. But Pearl Harbor is going to get us militarily engaged in a big way. And here's some of the actual pictures of Pearl Harbor. These ships had just taken on oil the day before, and so the explosions were tremendous. All right, recall that Japan is carving out a Pacific empire. They were the only Asian nation to industrialize, and because they were a series of islands themselves, they needed to expand in order to gain new resources, in order to fuel their industrial imperialist society. So it's a ever perpetuating set of circumstances there. America was getting very upset with Japanese expansion, though, particularly after their invasion of Manchuria in the 1930s. For World War II in Asia, it began in the 1930s when Japan took over the Korean Peninsula right here and then extended into northern China. That's the area we call Manchuria, this place right here. And some of the atrocities that the Japanese committed against the Chinese were so bad. And Americans, back in the United States, are reading books like The Good Earth that talked about the poor Chinese peasant and stuff. And there was a lot of sympathy that America felt towards what was being done to the Chinese people, but we were neutral. And so we are going to send some Lend-Lease supplies to China to help them fight. There will also be American volunteers, the first American volunteer group, the Flying Tigers, a group of pilots that go over there, led by a Texan, Claire Chenot. But ultimately, we're neutral. And one of the ways that we are going to try to assist the Chinese while still not technically joining the fights, we don't want to militarily join this thing unless we have to. World War I is very at the forefront of our memory, was to do an embargo against the Japanese, kind of as a way to sanction them or punish them. And so an embargo is where you refuse to trade something, you refuse to sell something to somebody. In this case, America was going to punish Japan for what Japan was doing to the Chinese people by basically refusing to sell our oil to them. And we were a major supplier of Japanese oil. since Japan needed a large supply of oil that they couldn't get from their own islands in order to feed their war machine and their giant navy, that meant Japan was going to need to expand elsewhere to get the oil that they were no longer receiving from the United States. And there is a lot of oil to be had in French Indochina, which is this area in Southeastern Asia that makes up the countries of Vietnam. That is Vietnam right there. Spoilers, we'll be talking a lot more about Vietnam later on. Cambodia, Laos, Thailand, Burma, all this area is Indochina. It's below China. And it has a lot of oil and rubber and other natural resources that the Japanese really wanted. But if Japan were to expand down into China and take over these places, that would mean that they'd have to go through these shipping lanes in the South China Sea, which would put them right by Thailand right here, Formosa. And also this place. Now, we have talked a lot about the Philippines. Remember that America gained the Philippines as a territory, kind of like a colony, after the Spanish-American War. And then we fought a 4-year, very bloody campaign, the Filipino-American War, in order to keep the Philippines. So they are ours. They are American territory. And Japan knew that if they went down here and they invaded French Indochina, they would be making enemies of the European nations that controlled these places, like France, like Britain. See there it says Burma was owned by the UK. That's like Myanmar today. They would be declaring war basically on France and Britain. And since America's real chummy with Britain and France, and we own the Philippines, and they would also be having to take the Philippines to secure these shipping lanes, then they would also be making an enemy of the United States. We're already on thin dice as it is. That's the whole reason we did the embargo in the first place, to punish them for their expansion. What do you think we would do if they expanded all here? So Japan, they see what's going to happen. They're making, they're making future plans here, looking ahead. And they know that they either have two choices. They can desist, they can stop with their expansion, or the only other option is to expand even more. And basically make an enemy of everyone and try to head us off. And that's why they're going to plan for the surprise attack on Pearl Harbor. Pearl Harbor was our naval base on the island of Oahu in the Hawaiian Islands, in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. And that was where our main fleet of ships for the United States Navy was docked at, was stationed. And so Japan knew if they could take out our ships before they went and attacked the Philippines, then they would head us off, and there would be nothing we could do to stop them from taking the Philippines and then all the rest of these places you see down here. So this is why Japan is going to attack Pearl Harbor, so they could get the Philippines and Vietnam and Laos and Cambodia and Indochina and all of this other stuff. But when they attack us on December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy, their surprise attack was very effective. They were able to sink 8 of our big battleships. Those are the second biggest ships in the entire fleet. But the big prize is the aircraft carriers. And America only had a few of them at the beginning of World War II, but all of them were not actually docked at Pearl Harbor in Hawaii on the morning of December 7th when the Japanese arrive. Instead, our fleet of aircraft carriers, those are the big ships like the floating, runways and stuff that the planes take off of and land on. Our aircraft carriers were actually out in the Pacific searching for the Japanese when the Japanese attacked us in Hawaii. And so the Japanese were not able to completely cut off our entire Navy, and that will come back to haunt them. That was a major mistake on their part. So the attack of Pearl Harbor begins early on a Sunday morning. They chose to attack on a Sunday because the Japanese knew that a lot of the American service members in Hawaii, a lot of the sailors would be either asleep, or they would be at breakfast, or they would be at church because it was a Sunday morning. And they carry out several waves. The attack code was Tora, 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 attack, attack, attack. And the Japanese Zeros, that was the Japanese plane that goes in, were loaded with torpedoes, which they they dropped, and then the torpedo went through the water and then slammed into the American ships. They also had bombs as well. And they had some midget submarines that they sent into the harbor, of which we captured one. And so the attack was extremely successful. America had actually been in peace negotiations with Japan when the Japanese attacked. The Japanese ambassador to the United States in Washington, D.C., was supposed to have delivered the formal declaration of war against the United States, so they weren't technically violating any treaties right before the attack commenced, but the timing was a little bit off. So they were technically attacking us unprovoked without any declaration of war. Not that it mattered. It was out of the blue. It was a surprise attack. It's murder in cold blood. You can't get away with attacking our major naval base and killing over 2,000 American sailors and not expect us to retaliate. And so Japan knows fully well what they're doing. They are provoking the United States. And one of their great admirals, the one who planned this, who was ordered to by Hirohito and mainly by Tojo and the military hierarchy, was Admiral Yamamoto. And he famously said, when he was ordered to carry out this, the planning for Pearl Harbor, he said, you know, this is kind of a mistake. He'd gone to college in the United States. He studied America extensively. He said, this is a mistake to attack the United States and make an enemy of them. It's like awakening the sleeping giant. And he is very right, because Pearl Harbor is the event that is going to bring the United States full throttle into World War II, militarily, economically, in every single way. Pearl Harbor will bring the United States into war. The day after the attack, so the attack was on December 7th, the day after, on December 8th, 1941, the United States President, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, FDR, he gives a speech before the American people on the radio, where he says very famously, yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy. The Empire of Japan has brutally and maliciously, without provocation, attacked our naval and air forces in Hawaii. You know, and he goes on to talk about this attack and basically asks Congress for a declaration of war, which they do give. And once America declares war on Japan, Japan, because of their treaty with Germany and Italy are then going to declare war against the United States, the alliances. And the United States will declare war on Germany, and we will be in World War II. Some other side notes. Pearl Harbor was the most devastating attack on American soil until the 9/11 terrorist attacks, and I guess you could say until the global pandemic, but that is kind of a different category, not necessarily military. Hawaii is right in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. It is very strategically placed. Remember that we put Pearl Harbor there in the first place because of the urgings of expansionists and imperialists back in the 1890s, like Alfred Thayer Mahan. Once America had gained the Philippines as a gateway to trade with China after the Spanish-American War, that was when the United States, under President William McKinley, chose to annex the Hawaiian Islands, which had earlier been taken 6 years earlier in 1893, been taken over from the Hawaiian monarchy and Queen Liliuokalani by a bunch of American businessmen like Sanford B. Dole, under the Dole Fruit Cups. And so our history of Hawaii goes way back to the 1890s. It's been a territory for a while, and this attack happens. The battleships that are sunk, there were 2 of them that capsized, like completely flipped over, and were totally destroyed, with a lot of the sailors and a lot of the 2,500 deaths being on those 2 ships. I think that was the Oklahoma, and the one that was really famous for sure was the USS Arizona. And the Arizona didn't capsize. The Arizona actually, a bomb went right into the magazine where the explosives were, and explosion ripped the ship in 2, and it quickly, both sides just sunk to the bottom of the harbor. There was several ships that were run aground by their own captains to prevent them from sinking as they made for the harbor entrance. There were hundreds of airplanes in the airfields in Hawaii that were destroyed by the Japanese attack. There were also many smaller ships, destroyers and cruisers, that were also sunk. But the battleships were the big prize that the Japanese got that day. And America's going to be upset. We felt like we were attacked when we had done nothing to provoke the Japanese besides the embargo. And a lot of American young men are going to enlist and join in December of 1941, right after this attack, to go and get revenge against the Japanese for what they did. So in America's mind, we're actually more upset at Japan at this point, early on in the war, than we are against, say, like the Germans against Hitler. And when we say that World War II is a two-theater, two-front war, remember, we're going to be fighting not only against the Japanese in the Pacific Ocean, which is going to be a lot of naval warfare, but we're also going to be fighting in Europe and in Northern Africa against mainly the Nazis, the Germans, but also against the Italians. All right. So we'll talk about more of how America is going to get into the war next time. Thank you guys for listening. I'm going to stop there. Don't do your summary yet. We will do that in part 2. Thank you guys. Bye.